Meantime, it has been 1 month since the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to prevent genocide in Gaza. The ICJ gave Israel until today to submit a report showing that it is complying with 6 separate orders. The court did not find that Israel was committing genocide. That matter is still under consideration, but nevertheless issued 6 orders meant to make sure genocide does not happen. The court says that Israel must, quote, do everything it can to prevent acts that could fall within the scope of the UN Convention on Genocide, make sure its military does not commit any acts covered by that convention, prevent and punish incitement that could encourage genocide, enable urgently needed basic services and humanitarian assistance, make sure that any evidence that could point to genocide is not destroyed. Israel was ordered to submit a report of its compliance by today. Let's get more on this. We are joined by Professor Chantal Meloni. She's joining us from Berlin, where she is with the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights and also an international law professor at the University of Milan. Welcome to the program, and thank you so much for joining us today. What exactly is the hearing at the International Court of Justice in The Hague about?
Yeah, the case that South Africa brought against Israel, as you rightly already recalled, is about the alleged violation of the Convention to prevent genocide. So we have seen on the 26th of January, exactly 1 month ago, the court, which I remember is the highest judicial institution at the UN level, ordered very precise provisional measures that Israel has to take in order to stop, prevent and punish acts of genocide, incitement to genocide.
Okay.
So now it is 1 month. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to ask you, because I really want to get to what is supposed to be submitted today, because we know that, previously Israel said that it wanted this case to be thrown out. The court came back and said that indeed it did have the jurisdiction to hear this case. Can we now expect Israel to make this report public that they are due to present today? I mean, after all, it is a confidential report to the ICJ, which will be sent to South Africa for comment. Will we get any more information?
Well, it's not a hearing what is happening today. The report is, as you said, sent confidentially, and I don't think that there are indications that let us think that the report will be available to the broader public. There are some precedents. The most important in this case is the one regarding the case of Gambia against Myanmar. We have seen Myanmar in 2020 also having to report back to the ICJ, and that report also was confidential. But of course, there is a possibility that the ICJ, in case the judges decide to issue additional provisional measures, for instance, that can be taken proprio motu by the court, or also at the request of South Africa, which will have access to the Israeli report, might in a way summarize a bit the content of the report in their order in case. But really, there are no indications that the state of Israel at the moment is thinking of making the report public to the broader public.
Okay. I'd like to get your legal expertise on a separate matter as well, because hearings on the legality of almost 60 years of Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories began a week ago as well at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Representatives of 50 states are taking part. Israel itself is staying away from those hearings. Give us a sense of what is going on there.
Yeah, that is a very important advisory opinion that has been in the making for many years. So in a sense, it is a coincidence that now we are seeing 2 cases regarding Israel at the same time in parallel ongoing at the International Court of Justice. In that case, is not a state that brought Israel in front of the court. It is the General Assembly that put a legal question in front of the judges, and it is about the legal consequences of a prolonged occupation of the Palestinian territory. So basically what is at stake there, and we have seen an unprecedented number of states participating in that proceeding. The whole past week has been hearings to hear not only from the state of Palestine, but also from 55 third states. Their legal reasonings will be for the court to assess whether what's going on since 57 years in the Palestinian territory can still be assessed as an occupation, in case whether this is lawful or unlawful. But in the end, basically what we are talking about is whether there is a crime of apartheid or a situation of apartheid ongoing there.
Okay, and of course that's a disputed term. Just very, 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 very briefly, will there be a verdict in that case, and if so, when?
Yeah, we can expect in a few months, probably, according to what has been the practice of the court in other similar cases. There will be an advisory opinion. As I said, it's not a judgment. It is not the same procedure as the one that we are seeing in South Africa against Israel. It will not be formally binding, but still very relevant.
Professor Chantal Meloni, thank you so much for joining us to share your legal expertise today.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm joined now by Michael Becker. He was an associate legal officer at the International Court of Justice from 2010 until 2014. Now he's teaching international human rights law at Trinity College, Dublin. Welcome to DW. Thanks so much for your time today. Now, Israel's report to the ICJ isn't expected to be made public, but do we have any indication what might be in this report?
Right, you're exactly correct that these reports are confidential reports, and the report will go to the court and then to South Africa for South Africa's response. So we may not see this anytime soon, if ever. But we can predict, I think, what Israel will try to emphasize in the report. But I should say at the start that there have been reports today, for example, that Prime Minister Netanyahu has asked for the report to be sparse. I think that would be a big mistake for Israel, because this is an opportunity for Israel to try to convey to the court everything that it thinks it's doing to comply with the order. I would expect Israel to focus mainly on what Israel sees as its best efforts to facilitate humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Now, whether the way Israel portrays its efforts to deliver humanitarian assistance would be credible to a broader audience is a different question. But I think that that's where the emphasis will be placed in Israel's report.
OK, but if the report isn't made public, I mean, is anything going to come of this? Because surely there'll be less public pressure on Israel to comply, you know, if we don't know what's in the report.
Absolutely, and that's a good reason why the court should change its practices and require that these implementation reports be made public. But it's really for South Africa here to play the role of having to come back to the court and try to refute what it may see as Israel's incomplete or even potentially misleading narrative about what's going on the ground. So in some ways, I actually think it's going to be South Africa's response, again, a confidential report, but South Africa's response rather than Israel's initial report that's more important here. Because this is an opportunity for South Africa to point out omissions from Israel's report. We've heard over the past several weeks reports about Israeli officials directly impeding certain efforts to deliver humanitarian assistance. There are also ways in which South Africa can probably point out to the court other things that are within Israel's power to do that, for whatever reason, Israel has not been doing. And so this is a chance for South Africa to put these things before the court, and it may in fact be the impetus for South Africa now to go back to the court and request new provisional measures or modified provisional measures, but measures that would be much more specific, much more precise than the types of quite broadly worded measures that the court imposed a month ago.
OK. Now, there are several organisations, the UN, Amnesty International, etc. They've all called on Israel to comply with the ICJ's orders. What happens if it doesn't do anything? Briefly, if you could.
Well, we're in a situation where the court's powers of enforcement are very limited. It's not really the court's job to enforce its own decisions. This falls on the international community. So we've already seen the fact that the provisional measures from last month have put enormous pressure on Israel, and that pressure is coming from other countries, including some of Israel's strongest supporters. So I think that this process simply feeds into that broader political dynamic with states, including the United States, putting pressure on Israel to change its course, to find a way towards a ceasefire, find a way to resolve the hostages crisis, and very importantly, find a way to deal with the humanitarian crisis that appears to only be getting worse.
Michael Becker from Trinity College, Dublin, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.